Apparently the only thing keeping us from liberty is a few more ideas.
A few more ideas. I mean, it's so confusing, isn't it? So much going wrong, so much to say, and all of it happening so quickly. The pace of repression outstrips our ability to understand it, and that is the real trick of the imperial thought machine. It's easier to hide behind 40 atrocities than a single incident. But they have a fight on their hands, don't they? Like elemental rights are such a simple thing to hold, they will have to shake the galaxy awfully hard to loosen our grip.
Welcome back to the Dialectic Dose. I'm your host, Austin Constantino. Through the last few episodes of this podcast, we've looked at capitalism, what it really is, how it manifests. We've looked at Marx's analysis of it and his groundwork for a society beyond it. And we've also looked at its imperial expansion. Now we confront, in my opinion, its most terrifying manifestation, the systematic murder of the living world that sustains all life on Earth. What unfolds before us transcends environmental crisis. We witness ecocide on a planetary scale. The deliberate assassination of ecosystems, the mass extinction of species, the poisoning of air, water, and soil, the destabilization of climate systems that allowed human civilizations to emerge. This destruction accelerates exponentially, driven by an economic system that devours everything in its path. The numbers stagger the mind. We have triggered the 6th mass extinction in Earth's history, the first caused by a single species. Current extinction rates exceed natural rates by 1,000 times. Half of all species could vanish within decades. Ocean dead zones spread like cancers, and forests that took millennia to grow disappear in hours. The atmosphere fills with gases that will cook the planet for centuries. And this apocalypse has authors. This devastation has corporate logos, stock tickers, quarterly reports. The same system that grinds human beings into profit margins grinds entire ecosystems into commodities with identical ruthlessness, identical blindness, identical contempt for life itself. But this crisis reveals capitalism's deepest contradiction. It's absolutely incompatible with planetary survival. The endless growth capitalism requires collides with the finite Earth we inhabit. The profit maximization capitalism demands conflicts with the ecological stability life requires. Understanding this contradiction means understanding how capitalism has colonized our minds. It's teaching us to see ourselves as separate from nature, superior to nature, and destined to dominate nature. Today, we dissect the greatest crime in human history, the murder of our planetary home for private profit. The war against nature required first waging war against human consciousness. Capitalism weaponized ancient ideologies to convince humanity that ecological destruction represents divine destiny rather than collective suicide. Judeo-Christian theology provided the perfect foundation through the doctrine of dominion. The first book of the Bible, Genesis, commands humans to subdue the earth and rule over every living thing. This supposed divine mandate grants humanity absolute authority over all life. Forests become timber resources, mountains become mineral deposits, and rivers become transportation corridors. Francis Bacon, a prophet of industrial science, made the connection explicit. Nature must be tortured to reveal her secrets, just as suspected witches face torture to extract confessions. This fusion of misogyny and ecological hatred reveals capitalism's psychological foundations. The domination of women and nature spring from identical impulses. Darwin's discovery of evolution through natural selection suffered immediate perversion into what is known as social Darwinism, which is the lie that capitalism represents survival of the fittest and human society. This grotesque distortion ignores evolution's actual mechanisms, while justifying economic inequality as biological destiny. Real evolution operates through cooperation as much as competition. Human ancestors survived ice ages and predators through mutual aid, resource sharing, collective problem solving. The hyper-individualism capitalism promotes contradicts millions of years of human development as intensely social species. Social Darwinism also justified imperial genocide by claiming colonized peoples were less evolved than their conquerors. This racist pseudoscience provided intellectual cover for exterminating indigenous societies whose sustainable practices threaten capitalism's ideological foundations. Modern capitalism promotes anthropocentrism, the psychotic belief that human desires justify any treatment of other species. This ideology treats the entirety of non-human life as valuable only for human purposes. Forests exist to provide lumber, oceans exist to supply fish, and animals exist to become products. Anthropocentrism makes it psychologically impossible to comprehend alternatives. If humans are divinely ordained to rule nature, if evolution proves competition drives progress, if other species exist for human benefit, then questioning capitalism's environmental destruction seems to question reality itself. This ideological framework transforms environmental destruction from crime into destiny. Capitalism doesn't accidentally harm ecosystems. It systematically murders them because its foundational beliefs demand conquest of the natural world. Capitalism's assault on nature operates through systemic violence that dwarfs all previous human impact. The machinery of destruction reflects capitalism's core imperatives: maximize immediate profits, externalize all costs, grow without limits, and convert everything into commodities. Consider the temporal insanity driving this destruction. Forests requiring centuries to mature vanish in hours beneath chainsaws. Oil reserves forming over millions of years burn away in decades. Topsoil accumulating over millennia washes away in single storms after industrial agriculture strips protective vegetation. Aquifers filling over geological ages pump dry within years. This temporal mismatch reveals capitalism's fundamental madness. Shareholders demand quarterly growth, while companies exhaust resources that cannot be replaced within human timeframes. The system devours the ecological foundations that make economic activity possible. Industrial capitalism introduced tens of thousands of synthetic poisons into environments that never encounter them during billions of years of evolution. These substances persist for decades or centuries, accumulating in food webs and disrupting biological processes in ways science barely comprehends. The chemical industry exemplifies capitalism's reckless approach to planetary poisoning. Companies routinely release new compounds without adequate testing, assuming safety until proven dangerous. When evidence of harm emerges, they fund studies manufacturing doubt, they bribe politicians, they delay regulations through captured agencies, and then develop the next profitable poison. DDT, PCBs, CFCs, PFAs, glyphosate, the alphabet soup of industrial toxins reveals a consistent pattern. Corporations develop profitable products with known environmental harms, market them aggressively while suppressing adverse research, fight regulation through captured institutions, and then introduce new chemicals to replace banned ones. Industrial agriculture represents capitalism's most devastating ecological assault. The diverse polycultures that sustained humanity for millennia give way to simplified monocultures requiring massive inputs of synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and fossil fuels while depleting soil and contaminating water. Wetlands that filtered water and harbored countless species drain away for cropland. Prairie grasslands that sequestered carbon and supported complex communities become corn and soy deserts. And forests harboring intricate ecological relationships become single-species plantations. Factory farming concentrates billions of animals in hellish conditions while generating massive pollution. Industrial livestock operations consume vast quantities of grain and water to produce meat inefficiently, while creating toxic waste lagoons that poison surrounding communities and generate methane emissions, accelerating climate breakdown. Capitalist development fragments habitats into isolated patches too small to sustain viable populations. Highways slice through migration corridors, and subdivisions eliminate nesting areas. Shopping centers pave over wetlands. Industrial facilities contaminate watersheds. This fragmentation creates ecological islands where populations become isolated, reducing genetic diversity and triggering local extinctions. Small habitat patches cannot support the complex food webs maintaining ecosystem stability, leading to cascading collapse as keystone species disappear. Urban sprawl exemplifies capitalism's land use pathology. Cities spread outward rather than upward, consuming farmland and natural areas for suburban developments requiring cars for every trip. And this sprawl destroys habitat while increasing fossil fuel consumption, air pollution, and infrastructure costs, creating landscapes hostile to both human community and ecological health. Climate breakdown represents capitalism's most explosive collision with planetary limits. Atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations destabilizing Earth's climate result directly from burning fossil fuels to power capitalist expansion. Yet the system causing climate chaos proves incapable of implementing solutions because those solutions threaten the most powerful corporations on Earth. Fossil fuel giants knew about climate change decades before public awareness. Internal documents from Exxon, Shell, and other oil companies reveal their scientists predicted global warming with remarkable accuracy starting in the 1970s. Instead of warning humanity or transitioning to renewable energy, these corporations launched the most sophisticated disinformation campaign in history. The climate denial machine spent billions spreading confusion about established science, funding fake experts, capturing regulatory agencies, and bribing politicians. They studied tobacco industry tactics for manufacturing doubt about smoking's health effects and applied identical methods to climate science. The goal never involved proving climate change false, only creating enough doubt to prevent action threatening fossil fuel profits. The climate changes already unleashed guarantee escalating catastrophe regardless of future actions. Greenhouse gases already in the atmosphere will continue warming the planet for centuries. Ice sheets, already destabilized, will continue raising sea levels for millennia, and feedback loops already triggered will continue accelerating warming beyond human control. Arctic ice that once reflected sunlight melts away, exposing dark ocean water that absorbs heat. Permafrost that sequestered carbon for millennia thaws and releases methane and carbon dioxide. Forests that absorbed carbon burn in wildfires that release stored carbon back to the atmosphere. Amazon rainforest transforms from carbon sink to carbon source as drought and fire consume the world's largest tropical forest. These feedback loops mean Earth's climate system has passed critical tipping points toward runaway warming. Even with immediate emission cessation, which shows no sign of occurring, would not prevent decades of accelerating climate breakdown as these amplifying processes interact. Look, the human consequences will be apocalyptic. Sea level rise will submerge coastal cities, housing hundreds of millions. Drought will make vast agricultural regions uninhabitable. Heat waves will kill massive numbers in areas lacking air conditioning, and storms will become more frequent and destructive than any in recorded history. Climate breakdown will trigger mass migrations as entire regions become uninhabitable. Hundreds of millions of climate refugees will flee drought, flooding, storms, and heat, and these movements will destabilize political systems, they will trigger resource wars, they will overwhelm receiving areas' capacity to provide basic services. Food systems will collapse as changing precipitation, extreme temperatures, and severe weather destroy crops. Ocean acidification will eliminate shellfish and disrupt marine food webs. Freshwater supplies will become unreliable as glaciers disappear and precipitation patterns shift. Public health systems will face overwhelming crisis as heat stress, air pollution, vector-borne diseases, and mental health impacts destroy medical infrastructure. Rather than transitioning away from fossil fuels, capitalism doubles down on ever more destructive extraction. Hydraulic fracturing poisons groundwater to extract natural gas from shale, and tar sand operations devastate boreal forests to produce synthetic crude oil. Mountaintop removals destroy entire ecosystems to access coal seams. Each new technique proves more environmentally catastrophic than the last, as easily accessible reserves become exhausted. Simultaneously with climate breakdown, capitalism drives the sixth mass extinction in Earth's history. The first caused, as I said earlier, by a single species. Current extinction rates exceed natural rates by 100 to 1,000 times, with scientists estimating half of all species could disappear within decades. This biological annihilation represents a crime against life itself. Each extinct species required millions of years to evolve, developing unique adaptations and ecological relationships that can never be recreated. When species vanish, they take entire evolutionary lineages, broken food webs, and ecological functions that maintained planetary stability. Habitat destruction drives most extinctions as capitalism converts natural areas into agricultural fields, urban developments, mining sites, or industrial facilities. Species that evolved in complex forest ecosystems cannot survive in simplified corn monocultures. Wetland birds cannot nest in drained swamps converted to shopping centers, and reef fish cannot live in bleached coral graveyards. The Amazon rainforest, containing 10% of Earth's species, faces systematic destruction as cattle ranchers and soy farmers clear thousands of acres daily to produce beef and animal feed for export. Every day, an area of rainforest larger than New York City disappears beneath chainsaws and bulldozers. Every week, wetlands the size of major metropolitan areas become drained and filled for development. Chemical pollution creates landscapes of death where nothing survives. Neonicotinoid pesticides trigger catastrophic bee colony collapses, eliminating pollinators essential for both crops and wild plants. As bee populations crash, the plants they pollinate face reproductive failure and population crashes, cascading through entire ecosystems. Industrial fishing has eliminated 90% of large predator fish while destroying seafloor habitats with bottom trawling gear. Many ocean areas now contain more plastic waste than marine life. The collapse of cod fisheries off Newfoundland eliminated not only the fish, but seabirds, marine mammals, and entire ocean ecosystems that depended on them. Coral reefs, harboring 25% of marine species despite covering less than 1% of ocean area, face complete elimination within decades due to ocean acidification, as well as warming temperatures and pollution. The Great Barrier Reef has experienced multiple massive bleaching events as rising temperatures stress corals beyond survival limits. Entire reef ecosystems collapse within months as fish communities disappear from dead coral graveyards. This mass extinction differs qualitatively from previous events. Ancient extinctions resulted from asteroid impacts or volcanic eruptions occurring over millions of years. But current extinctions result from deliberate corporate choices, prioritizing immediate profits over planetary survival. The genocide of indigenous peoples represents both humanity's greatest crime and capitalism's assault on ecological knowledge accumulated over millennia. Indigenous societies developed sophisticated understanding of local ecosystems and sustainable practices that maintained ecological balance across generations. These societies understood what capitalism refuses to acknowledge. Humans belong within nature, not above it. Indigenous worldviews recognize kinship with other species, obligations to future generations, and the intrinsic value of all life. Their sustainable practices often maintained higher biodiversity than surrounding areas while providing for human needs. Capitalism targets indigenous peoples precisely because their territories contain valuable resources and their worldviews threaten capitalist ideology. If societies can thrive without endless accumulation, and if communities can govern themselves without state violence, if humans can live sustainably without destroying their environments, then capitalism's claims about human nature collapse entirely. Violence against indigenous peoples escalates whenever corporations discover valuable resources on indigenous territories. Amazonian tribes face assassination when resisting mining and logging operations. Arctic peoples face forced relocation when oil companies want to drill in their homelands. And Pacific Islanders face submersion when sea level rise makes their territories uninhabitable. Indigenous resistant movements represent the front lines of environmental defense because indigenous territories contain 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. When indigenous peoples successfully defend their lands, they protect ecosystems benefiting all humanity. When corporations defeat indigenous resistance, they gain access to forests, rivers, and mineral deposits that face immediate destruction. The systematic destruction of indigenous societies eliminates irreplaceable ecological knowledge along with the people who developed it. When indigenous languages disappear, they take detailed understanding of local plants, animals, weather patterns, and ecosystem dynamics that science cannot replace. Faced with growing environmental awareness, capitalism deploys its most sophisticated weapon, the ability to absorb opposition and transform it into new profit opportunities. Environmental movements that began as challenges to industrial civilization face constant pressure to accept reforms that perpetuate the system while providing illusions of progress. For instance, the concept of carbon footprints exemplifies this co-option perfectly. British Petroleum, one of the world's largest oil companies, popularized this term through advertising campaigns, shifting responsibility for climate change from fossil fuel corporations to individual consumers. Rather than stopping oil extraction, BP encouraged people to calculate personal emissions and reduce them through lifestyle changes. This individualization of environmental responsibility serves corporate interests by deflecting attention from systemic causes. While individuals agonize over shorter showers or smaller cars, oil companies expand extraction operations and chemical manufacturers increase toxic production. Going green became a marketing category rather than a challenge to capitalism's growth imperative. Corporations now sell quote-unquote eco-friendly versions of fundamentally destructive products. Electric SUVs requiring massive lithium mining, organic cotton clothing produced in sweatshops, renewable energy facilities destroying habitats for endangered species. These green products often cause environmental damage equal to conventional alternatives when full life cycle impacts are considered. Electric vehicles require rare earth mining that devastates landscapes. Biofuels drive deforestation and food price increases. The green consumer movement channels environmental anxiety into profitable market categories while leaving intact the systematic drivers of ecological destruction. People express environmental concern through purchasing decisions rather than political action, maintaining capitalism while feeling virtuous about consumption choices. Capitalism's most sophisticated co-option involves turning environmental protection into profit opportunities through market mechanisms like carbon trading, biodiversity credits, and payment for ecosystem services. These schemes promise to solve environmental problems by putting price tags on natural systems and allowing market forces to allocate conservation resources. Carbon markets allow corporations to continue polluting by purchasing credits from projects that theoretically reduce emissions elsewhere. These markets routinely fail to deliver promised reductions, while creating environmental injustice as communities bear pollution burdens so corporations can claim carbon neutrality. Many environmental organizations have been captured by corporate funding that channels their activities toward market-friendly solutions and away from systemic critiques. Large environmental groups often promote policies benefiting corporate donors while claiming to advance environmental protection. The institutional capture ensures mainstream environmentalism poses no fundamental threat to the economic system destroying the planet. Environmental groups become junior partners in managing capitalism's contradictions, rather than forces for systemic transformation. I want to talk about the impossibility of green capitalism. The fundamental contradiction between capitalism and environmental protection cannot be resolved through reforms, technologies, or market mechanisms. Capitalism requires endless exponential growth on a finite planet, a mathematical impossibility guaranteeing ecological collapse regardless of efficiency improvements. Exponential growth means economic activity doubles repeatedly within fixed periods. Even modest annual growth rates produce enormous increases over decades. An economy growing at 3% annually doubles every 23 years, quadruples every 46 years, increases 16-fold every 92 years. No natural system can sustain such growth indefinitely. Efficiency improvements cannot overcome exponential growth because they face absolute physical limits while growth continues indefinitely. Doubling energy efficiency, while quadrupling economic activity, still doubles energy consumption. Having material intensity while increasing production eightfold still quadruples resource consumption. Earth system scientists have identified 9 planetary boundaries defining safe operating spaces for human civilization: climate change, biodiversity loss, nitrogen cycles, ocean acidification, land use change, freshwater use, ozone depletion, atmospheric aerosols, and chemical pollution. Humanity has crossed at least 4 boundaries and approaches others. Climate change, biodiversity loss, nitrogen pollution, and land use change have exceeded safe limits, pushing Earth systems toward irreversible tipping points. Ocean acidification, freshwater depletion, and chemical pollution threaten critical thresholds within decades. Staying within planetary boundaries requires absolute reductions in resource consumption and environmental impacts, regardless of economic efficiency. This directly contradicts capitalism's growth imperative, which demands continuous increases in production and consumption to maintain profitability and employment. Corporate structures within capitalism make environmental protection impossible, even when executives recognize ecological crisis. Publicly traded corporations face legal obligations to maximize shareholder returns, creating fiduciary duties that override environmental concerns when they conflict with profitability. Breaking free from capitalism's ecocidal trajectory requires fundamental transformation of economic systems and of social relationships and of humanity's relationship with the natural world. This transformation cannot emerge from reforming capitalism, but demands building alternative systems prioritizing ecological health and human well-being over profit accumulation. Indigenous worldviews offer crucial guidance by recognizing humanity's place within the community of life rather than above it. Traditional ecological knowledge provides tested approaches to meeting human needs while maintaining ecological balance. The concept of buen vivir from Andean cultures emphasizes reciprocal relationships with nature, collective well-being over individual accumulation, and harmony between human communities and natural systems. Degrowth movements in wealthy countries recognize that reducing material consumption is necessary to stay within planetary boundaries while improving quality of life through stronger communities, more leisure time, and deeper connections with nature. These movements demonstrate that human flourishing depends more on social relationships and meaningful activity than on material accumulation. Ultimately, preventing ecological collapse requires political movements powerful enough to overthrow capitalism and establish economic systems prioritizing planetary health over private profit. This transformation cannot emerge from individual lifestyle changes or market mechanisms, but it demands organized mass action to restructure economic and political institutions. Climate justice movements connect environmental protection with social justice by recognizing that the same systems oppressing workers also destroy ecosystems. Indigenous resistant movements defending their territories provide models for bioregional governance based on ecological relationships rather than abstract political boundaries. The choice before us could not be starker. Continue capitalism's suicidal trajectory toward planetary destruction, or build economic systems honoring our place within the web of life. The window for preventing catastrophic change has closed, but the window for preventing total collapse remains narrowly open. All right, we've dissected capitalism's systematic murder of the living world, from the poisoned ideologies justifying dominion over nature, through the machinery of annihilation destroying ecosystems, to the Great Deception, channeling environmental concern into profitable dead ends. The scale staggers comprehension. The urgency defies expression. And yet, even as we confront unprecedented crises, we glimpse unprecedented possibilities. Nature possesses remarkable resilience when given opportunities to recover. Human societies possess remarkable capacity for transformation when facing existential threats. The ecological crisis demands social transformation more profound than any in human history. But the alternative is civilizational collapse. We must choose between capitalism and survival, between private profit and planetary health, and between individual accumulation and collective flourishing. This choice cannot be made individually through consumer decisions. It requires collective action to transform economic and political systems. It demands movements powerful enough to challenge corporate power and establish democratic control over production decisions. The movements we need are emerging. Climate strikers demand system change rather than climate change. Indigenous water protectors defend the land against corporate extraction. And socialist movements challenge capitalism's growth imperative. Environmental justice organizations connect ecological and social liberation. Marx showed us that capitalism contains the seeds of its own destruction. Our ecological crisis reveals those contradictions in their starkest form. Our task is ensuring that what emerges from capitalism's inevitable collapse serves life, rather than continuing exploitation in new forms. The earth that birthed us over billions of years of evolution awaits our decision. Will we remain capitalism's willing accomplices in planetary destruction? Or will we become midwives to an ecological civilization that honors the sacred gift of life itself? The answer lies not in technology or individual choices, but in our willingness to organize, resist, and transform. Another world is possible. Another world is necessary. Until next time, this has been the Dialectic Dose. I'm Austin Constantino, your host, reminding you that the future of life on Earth depends on the choice we make: capitalism or survival.